Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Walking with Warriors podcast, brought to you by Vertex Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, where we take a look at the sickle cell disease caregiver experience through our eyes. I'm Elle.
I'm Patrice. We have another episode of Our Take, and today we're talking about advocating for our warriors in the healthcare system.
Please note that the views expressed are those of the host or guest and are not necessarily shared by Vertex. All participants have been compensated by Vertex. This podcast is only intended for U.S. audiences and for educational purposes. It is not intended to replace discussions with your healthcare provider.
Remember, everyone's experience with sickle cell disease, or SCD, is different. So it's important to talk to a doctor before making any changes to your routine.
You know, I always like to tell family members or parents, trust your gut. That's number one. Your instincts don't lie. If there's something, you feel like there's something going on with your child that's not being acknowledged, or if you feel like your team is just not quite giving the care that your child needs, speak up. It's okay. You know, the doctors, they have gone to school, they have the information, but they have the information based on folks who they've seen. Mm-hmm. You know, you could have a unique case. And so it just doesn't hurt to speak up.
Right.
9 times out of 10, you're going to be right. And if you're not, it's just a test. You know what I'm saying? It's a test that maybe they can run, or it's a test that maybe they can physically do to see what's different.
Right.
Just speak up. So trust your instinct. Listen to your child. Your child will tell you what they need.
Yes.
For sure. Just listen to them. And if it seems like they're not being heard, then you have to speak up on their behalf.
I know I actually had to leave one of our practices because they weren't communicating with my daughter's hematology team. And I said, I need everybody to talk to each other because, you know, it's important because it's one body and they must make sure they're treating the whole person. And so that was definitely a challenge because I look at her team, I look at it like it's a partnership.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, as parents, we want their team to love our child just as much as we do. For many caregivers, one of their biggest worries is when their loved one transitions from pediatric care into adult care. And our children go to the hospital numerous times in their childhood. How did you start teaching your son to advocate for himself while he was young?
Sure. So, you know, there was no significant situation or experience that said, it's now to start. Now's the time to start. And so what I started doing is redirecting them. Okay. And so the doctors would come in, they would ask me a question or dad, and I would just say, well, son, what do you think? Well, what happened? Can you tell them what happened? And so we started doing that very early on. And from there, when there was an issue, instead of me bringing it to the doctor, I would have my son address it with the doctor or with the nurse. And we just kept increasing it. There were some things where he just wasn't comfortable yet bringing to them. And he would say, well, can you talk to them about it? And of course, I do that. But for the most part, I just really pushed that and just kept saying, you take this, you talk to them, you tell them. And even if we had to talk about it before they came in, just so that he was more comfortable, so that he knew that he could articulate what he was thinking or what he was feeling, I just wanted to make sure he felt he was prepared to do it. And so that's how we did it. And
wow.
Yeah, and it works. it works.
It does. It does. When I think about my daughter, I realized that because I was often the one at her appointments, that her doctors and the healthcare team would start talking to her, which was great. But I then realized that often they would rely on me to answer the questions. So what I started to do was really ask her dad to go to the appointments so I wouldn't be there. And really,
Okay.
dad was somewhat aware, but my daughter was much more aware about her care and just, her different symptoms than he was. So she would have to answer the questions herself. And so for us, that was kind of how we've been able to transition to getting her to speak up more for herself. Now, we're talking about like hospital appointments and everything, but another one of many caregivers' biggest fears is the emergency department.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Now they definitely change drastically once they've actually transitioned into adult. But before then, as they get older, you see a difference.
Right.
You see how there's a difference in how you're received. There's a difference in sometimes how you're even how you're spoken to, how the reactions of the care team when they ask you a question and you tell them mostly what you need, what works for you, how I can be helped. There are new reactions from when you're a child. The first one is, "Oh, sweetie, okay, let's get you some care." That goes out the window totally. And as you get to be maybe 13, 14, 15, those ages, depending on, of course, the ER, depending on the individuals, because every ER, individuals are just that. They're individual. And when you come in, it's almost like, "Oh, you again," or, "Oh, you have sickle cell. Okay." It's this unspoken feeling of, it's almost like a resentment. Like, I don't really care to deal with this today. And you're like, well, I don't want to be in pain today. So it's very, very hard. When you get to that as a caregiver, it's hard to watch that. And it's hard not to be engaged. It's hard not to take over. You still got to let them do it. And that's a tough one. You want them to get the care that they're there for. You want them to be acknowledged. You want whatever it is they're experiencing to be acknowledged.
Right.
So it's pretty tough.
And it's kind of sad that during the preteen years, they're not seen as cute or as lovable.
Yeah.
And they need just as much compassion.
Absolutely.
If not more, because they're so much more aware of it. And that's when they start to notice how people are treating them. And when I think about just moving that transition, my daughter hasn't transitioned into adult care yet. She's a teenager, so she's 16. So I am very afraid because this is one of the commonalities that we hear in our community. So now that your son is an adult, I know he's taken on a lot of responsibility for his own care.
Yep.
And you've had to kind of take a step back. How has that been for you?
Difficult. And I think it's kind of twofold for me, because I am a person who wants to maintain that control. I'm a person who wants to help you make these decisions. And then I'm a mom. So, it's my natural, it's kind of my nature to want to handle it, right?
Yes.
And then I'm a mom. And when you're a mom, you take care of it. So I've had to pull back, let him do what he does. He he'll call. Like, I'll say, do you want me to go with you? No, I got it. And he'll go in unless it's really bad. Like if he is having difficulty walking or something like that. So I can go get him a wheelchair and all of that. But if he can go in, he's like, nope, I got it.
Your son has really taken on this responsibility as a young adult.
Mm-hmm.
How has he changed? Has his personality changed?
With his health, though, he takes on a different persona.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of, he don't play about that. And so if something's not going well, he had a hospital stay recently. And there was a doctor who was seeing him. It was a hospitalist. And it just wasn't going well. And he requested a different physician. He said, this isn't working. And he just laid out all of the information. He was prepared. He could articulate it. And he said, this is my request. And they did it. And I was like, very good. Very
good. He made you proud.
Yes. Because he was really not being treated well. And so I believe it was one of those instances, and it's not all doctors, but I believe it was one of those instances where they came in with some biases that were just unfounded. And when you have that, it's hard to get good care.
Mm-hmm.
It's, with everything they do is going to be clouded. So it's just, it doesn't work well.
Is there any advice you would give to a caregiver who's sitting in our shoes, who's sitting right there in the same position we're in? They're afraid, just like we are. Mm-hmm. They feel like this experience is scary.
Yeah.
But what advice do you have for them?
Children have such great understanding. They understand way more than I think we give them credit for. And if they've lived with this all of their lives, they get it.
Yes.
Just have a real conversation. There are some things, I don't believe in hiding information from children in that sense, but I know that there are some things that you want to make sure is spoken to them in an age-appropriate manner.
Right.
But be real and talk to them and let them know, here's where we are. What would you like to have happen? What do you, they'll ask the kids when they come in, what number of pain are you comfortable with? So those kinds of conversations, talk to them about that, help them understand like their baseline numbers. They can remember that,
Yes.
If you teach them, they can walk in and say, well, my hemoglobin is usually this. When I'm sickling, my retic count is usually this, or whatever it is. I just think we have to start as early as possible, but it's based on your child.
I'm always amazed when I see children living with sickle cell disease because they're brilliant.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up going through this journey of having a chronic illness, but because they've had to be, talking to different healthcare teams for years, they really become pros at it. So we really have to give our kids more credit than we do sometimes because they can do it. Yeah. It's been done before. And I love that you said start early because often different hospitals will have different programs and they sometimes start around 15, which is very late because you have to start cultivating that skill of feeling comfortable, trusting your team.
Yes.
Trust is a big one. And so my advice to families would be to model how to partner. There will be some hard times and some challenges. And I think for us as parents, when we show them how we go through the hard times, that's when we're teaching them. So I think, this was definitely one of those topics that just really got to me because it is one of those experiences that is full of worry, but it's also full of hope. I talk about having good times. So we're making memories with our kids. Every time isn't going to be challenging. There will be some good memories. There will be some excellent teams. And we have to be ready for that as well. thank you so much for spending some time with us. If you liked this episode and want us to keep making more, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can listen to or watch the Walking with Warriors podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and walkingwithwarriors.com.
We'll be back with another episode talking about navigating relationships with our warriors and our loved ones. In the meantime, you can find resources for support on walkingwithwarriors.com. See you next time.